Hey everyone, Anime Echoes here. So, something I wanted to discuss is whether art is subjective or objective. And when I say art, I mean the quality of art, the quality of a story, the quality of entertainment. Is everyone's preferences just all subjective, or is there some objective traits as well when it comes to what's a good story? Now, I do think there are objective traits, definitely. There's heaps of, how-to guides on how to make a good story. Many people do like an analysis of a story to show its depth and all the intention that the author put through, or the manga creator, or whoever. So there's definitely almost collective understanding that good stories and bad stories in some way exist. But I am also kind of wondering, how do we really determine this? Because there's plenty of series, especially when something gets popular, where there'll be, two sides that absolutely loves it and then absolutely tries to crap on it. Now, I don't think that's actually a reflection of whether the story's good or not. I think that's just a reflection of it being popular. Something gets popular, there's always going to be a side that wants to tear it down. That's just how it is. And it's not to say that that side doesn't have genuine critiques as well. It's just a phenomenon that happens. So then, the question becomes, what's a good critique? One thing I've been thinking is that maybe a good critique is based on the author's intention. So what did the author actually intend to do? And did they fully follow through on that intention? So they'll be making a story and crafting it and then wanting to do something, and then we analyze them based on what they actually want to do and if they did it well. But then the person who's making that judgment is going to be the viewers. Now, if many people think it's great, is that an objective metric on a story being good? Maybe. Or is that just a metric that everyone is following the same standard of what makes a story good? So essentially there is, in the social zeitgeist, there is a general understanding of what a good story is, and the collective enjoying something is just a reflection of that standard. But is there something beyond that? Is there something beyond conforming to just the group collective and what they think is good? Is there something higher or behind the scenes that determines that something is of high quality just through the eyes of someone who's viewing it, where you don't need, the external validation of a group of people to determine that it's good? And I think obviously that's possible because everyone has their own opinions, everyone has their own preferences, everyone believes something is good, something is okay, something's an 8 out of 10, something's a 10 out of 10. Everyone has their own tastes. But there is this interesting discourse that happens where we understand that subjectivity exists. We understand that everyone has an ability to comprehend, author's intentions and also the quality of general storytelling. So, we understand that viewers are able to have a subjective and objective experience with art itself. But then we see from time to time where there are these moments where, people will get into a story and then, they'll get into so many chapters of that story. And then by the end of it, they're complaining and getting frustrated by the fact that this story isn't what they wanted. And it's funny because the opinions that they'll have is, well, if only this story did this, and then you look through even the previous chapters that they went through, and somehow that was never there to begin with. So this phenomenon, I think, is kind of interesting because it really gets into the subjectivity of people's experience. And how did that person actually even interact with this story to begin with? How were they able to go so many chapters and then to have an issue with, let's just say the latest arc or something, that the series has never intended to do, ever? It was never that kind of series. The author never even intended it for it to be in that way. Maybe they kind of did at the start. Maybe that was from the pressures of the magazine that they're publishing for. But it was never about that. It was never the main appeal of the story. And yet people are reading these stories and then surprised when when an author gets big, they're really just going all in on what they kind of want to do. And what they want to do is actually kind of more niche and more specific and doesn't really tailor as much to the general audience, which ends up creating backlash. So I think it's really interesting because what it's showing is that maybe there are many stories out there, right? And maybe you're not actually supposed to interact with all of them. So just because something gets popular, does it actually mean that you're supposed to interact with it? Does that mean that you're supposed to actually enjoy it, have an opinion about it, to actually critique its quality? If we step out a bit, there's the world, right? And in the same way, it's not like you travel to every part of the world in your life, right? You don't see every nook and cranny of the world. In the same way, in terms of entertainment, you're not going to watch everything. That's not possible. So why is it that people are interacting with media that they might not actually need to be interacting with, but they feel like they should be? Maybe like what actually got them into consuming something, probably just, this could be nice, let me just watch this, but then sticking with it for so long, and then right after that complaining that it's not something they thought it was. It's kind of bizarre, but it's also very interesting. What got them through all these chapters, and then what made them finally be like, you know what, this isn't what I want, and maybe they feel cheated in a certain way because they've gone through all these chapters and now they just want to give their opinion out. They just want to voice their criticism. But at the same time, and I think that's fair, by the way, just get your opinion out, voice your criticism. But then at the same time, it is kind of interesting where it's like, why don't people just drop it? Why don't people just give up on a series if they're not enjoying it? What pulls them back over and over again to this series that they're clearly not enjoying the actual content of, but they do seem to enjoy the discussion of it. And I think that's where the crux of it is, where maybe they felt like they've been part of this community with this series for a while, and then they feel like they are in some ways a part of that, and they don't actually want to get out of that, and at the same time they want to justify to themselves perhaps that they spent a good amount of time, or maybe they don't want to admit to themselves that they wasted their time on a series that they never should have actually touched to begin with, but they did, And anyway, we were talking about the subjectivity and objectivity of art, and the reason why I brought up all of that is because I think it's showcasing that subjectivity is quite prevalent, that art does have a lot of subjective parts to it. The idea that maybe there's stories out there that you just don't need to interact with because it's not made for you is getting into that subjective part of art. That there's all these things out there, but you're only really supposed to experience a bunch of them, When we think about our favorites, there's not many of them, right? But they're the ones that stick, and everything else is kind of just an experience that you go through. But the ones that stick are the ones that are special. But then the ones that you keep seeing them because it's popular, and you keep interacting with them because you just keep seeing it, you can't not see it. But then it's like, why keep up with something that you were never supposed to interact with that much to begin with? I think that is a point to art and media and stories having a pretty big subjective element. The dialogue might need to be a very specific way for you to enjoy it. You might need a lot of drama in your show, or a lot of mystery in your show. There's going to be all these personal things that come up. And yet at the same time, we have all these discussions about what's good storytelling. What is a well-done story? It's funny, which is a objective kind of statement, that there is something that we can look to say this is a good story. Now, this is why I prefer something that we talked about before, which is to assess based on the author's intent. Do they do well what they're actually intending to do well? And that requires an eye of discernment to actually be able to be like, okay, what is the author actually trying to do here? Like, what do they care about? Because they're only going to make a story that they care about. They're not going to make a story that they don't give a shit about. They're not going to, like, if an author, has some fighting at the start of their series, but ultimately doesn't care about including fighting, then they're not going to include it, and they're not going to make that a primary focus of the series. You know what I mean? So, like, you wouldn't exactly assess them based on how well they do fighting if they don't really care about it. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, what's the author's intent? Because that's where I see, like, the reconciliation of subjective and objective. The objective part being how well does the author do something, and the subjective part being what is the author's intention. And then you reconcile those two by saying how well does the author do what it tries to intend to do, and then aligning yourself to that. And that's where you can get like a good show that is also for you. So yeah, that's just my opinion on whether media is subjective or objective. Now clearly my answer is that I think it lies in the middle somewhere. And I don't believe that everyone should be interacting with every piece of media that's out there. But, I'm going to go for even more of a statement. I don't believe most people should be experiencing most media that's out there. I think they should try and, I don't really care what people do at the end of the day, but I think they should try to have a very internal experience with what they're watching or what they're consuming, so that so that it really resonates. But what that will do is really narrow down the number of stuff that you're gonna experience. So there is that as well. So yeah, just an idea. I believe it lies somewhere in the middle. So yeah, thanks for listening. I'm keen to see what you guys think, and yeah, take care.